I know that many of you have been greatly impacted by our honored guest today. I know that his writing, whether it's the very first book that it wasn't the first book that he came out with, but it was the real first book that really became a New York Times best-selling book, Blue Like Jazz, or it was more, his latest book that we're going to have available here, by the way, for you, Scary Close. I know that if you bookend that and then all the books in between, that many of you have been impacted by Donald's writing. You've been impacted by his teaching, from storyline conferences down to other things. He's also on the presidential task force, and so he's involved in even just governance in this country. Just a very high-level leader who's just decided today to come and invest into us. I don't know about you, but I feel indebted to the ministry of this man. I feel indebted to the writings of this man personally, because I've seen the effect of it in my own life. It's made me hopefully a better dad, hopefully a better husband, just a better pastor. And so anybody else just been impacted by Donald's writing and teaching and everything? Can you just wave? Can you just, Donald, look around you. A lot of these people just are grateful that you're here. Can we just put our hands together? Come on, spread the love for the great Donald Miller. Come on up.
Thank you, David. I appreciate that. Wow, that was awesome. You guys, I grew up Southern Baptist, and the worship is better now. You guys don't remember the day when I was a kid. I mean, it was so bad. It was, I have decided, I'm so excited to follow Jesus. Couldn't be more excited. It was really bad. And it's a lot better now. Well, I'll tell you what I've been doing the last few years. I've been studying stories. For about 10 years, I've been studying how story structure works. I just got fascinated by it. It's so fun to study it. And I did that for a couple reasons. One, just to get started, just to be a better writer, right? To write better books, and then got to work on a screenplay, and then discovered that story structure really parallels life in so many ways, and began to think about life as a story. And so wrote about that and started helping people live a better story. But the problem with studying story structure is, and this is a little caveat, I'm going to ruin movies for you today. I'm going to tell you how they work. I know, I'm so sorry. Yeah, but I'm going to do it. And stories are very formulaic, and they're so formulaic, and if you know them, you know it. So my wife hates going to movies with me, because she knows at some point I'm going to elbow her, and I'm going to point at the screen and say, that guy dies in 31 minutes. And he does. He does. I'll tell you how Star Wars ends right now. No, I'm not going to do it. Anyway, I love stories, and I've discovered, though, as I just study stories, that there are really four major roles in most stories that you go see at the movie. Four major roles, and in my opinion, I think they're the four roles that we often play in life, right? There's the victim, then there's the villain, then there's the hero, and then there's one we don't think about very often, but I think it's actually the most important role, and it's the role of guide. And if you think about it, you and I often play the victim, the villain, the hero, and the guide, not only in our life, but in a given day, depending on whether or not you've eaten lunch, right? And I want to talk a little bit about what roles these are, because it's important. Because I think a lot of us, especially at this age, we're wondering, what role am I going to play in my life? I mean, what role do I wake up and say, this is my identity, this is who I am, this is where I fit on the planet, this is how I'm going to impact the planet, and we have a conscious decision to make. Am I going to be the victim today? Am I going to be the villain? Will I play the role of hero? Or will I be the guide? And so I want to unpack a little bit of what these four roles do. The victim, if you identify yourself as a victim, the dominant thing that the victim is looking for is for someone to rescue them, right? That's what the dominant need for a victim is. They need to be rescued. And so if we are waking up every day and we're saying, man, I wish somebody would just come along and rescue me, then we are self-identifying, maybe without even knowing it, we're self-identifying as the victim. And then there's the villain, and we all know the villain's the bad guy. And the villain wakes up every day, and normally what the villain is trying to do is seek vengeance. The villain has usually been hurt in some way, and they're out to get even with whoever hurt them. And so if we wake up one morning, we say, I'm going to get so-and-so because they talk behind my back. We have to be really careful. Have you ever done that? I'm going to get so-and-so because they've talked behind my back. You ever done that? Ever felt that? Raise your hand. Nobody. This is a really good group of awesome Christians. Yeah, we have, right? And we have to be careful because if we step into that too far, we're stepping into the role of villain in our life. There's the victim, the villain, then there's the hero, and the hero is doing what? Well, the hero is trying to save somebody who's a victim. They're trying to rescue somebody. They're getting up every day, and they're doing work that tries to, as the Bible would say in the book of Genesis in describing the life of Joseph, trying to save many lives. And then there is the guide, and this character is fascinating. I'm going to get to him at the end of this talk. But the guide is giving up their lives to try to help heroes win the day. You know, as I look at these roles, it becomes more and more important to me the older I get, because what I want in my life is really to live a life of meaning, exceptional meaning. And I think we all know when we go to a movie and you see a really good movie. You know what the sign to me that I saw a really good movie is? It's this. It's after the movie's over, everybody just kind of sits in the theater for another few minutes and lets the credits roll, right? You ever been to a movie where nobody really gets up, the credits start rolling? If it's an okay movie, as soon as it's over, you're up, right? But if it's one of those movies that really hits you, think about the last movie you saw that really hit you like that. I think about movies like The King's Speech. I think about movies like Inside Out. Did you see Pixar's Inside Out? Wasn't that great? Didn't you just want to sit there for another couple minutes? And it's almost like if I had to name the emotion that's going on in my heart at the end of a really great movie like that, if I had to name the emotion, it's going to surprise you, but I think this is the emotion. It's gratitude. I feel a sense of gratitude. And it's not necessarily gratitude for the actors who are in the movie or the screenwriters or the directors and all that, although I'm grateful for them. What I actually sense after a really good story is told to me, I have a sense of gratitude that I'm grateful to be alive. And the reason I'm grateful to be alive is because the story that I've just encountered has shown me that life can in fact be better, deeper, more meaningful, and more beautiful than I thought. It was like a little wake-up call of this thing that we're experiencing is really more beautiful than we've considered. And this story, if only for 10 or 15 minutes, made me go, I want to tap into that. Here's why I bring that up. Here's why. Because you are at the beginning of Act 2 of your life. You are moving into decisions about what you are going to do with your life. And in fact, you're moving into decisions about who you're going to be in your life, what role you're going to play. And here's what I want for you, and it's cryptic, but I'm going to say it anyway. I want for you someday in the future, and this moment will happen, I want for your funeral to be a bunch of people sitting around listening to the story of your life, and I want them to sit there for an extra 5 minutes after your funeral and feel grateful. Because you, and what you did, showed them that life could be more meaningful and more beautiful than they thought. That, to me, is a really good aim, a really good obligatory or climactic scene for all of us to head toward, that we would live in such a way that our story would inspire the world and give people pause and say, I think a human being can do more than we considered at first. What a beautiful story that would be. And in order to get there, because we have decisions in this process, I think we should consider these 4 roles. I want to look first at victim. And when we hear the word victim, we know there are very real victims in the world. The Syrian refugee crisis, all that you're learning about on campus this week, people who are in situations that are so dire and so grave, whose wounds are so open and bleeding and painful that they simply need and must have help. I also think there is a temptation for some of us to self-identify as victims when we are in fact not victims. Henry Cloud defines victims in this way. He says, it's people with no way out. I mean, a real true victim is somebody who has no other possibility. So this removes a lot of the stuff that you and I deal with on a day-to-day basis. Like when you get to the cafeteria and they're out of banana pudding, you're not actually a victim. Right? Some of you are going, no, you have never had the banana pudding, it's so good. No, right? And we are so tempted to play this victim, but I want to be really careful and identify this role, and I want to point out some of the landmines in it for us. First of all, every human being, every one of you, is born a legitimate victim. There's nothing that you can do. You don't come out of the womb and say, I need to get a job, right? I mean, your parents may have said that to you, but you didn't think that. Yeah, we're legitimate. We need someone to take care of us. We need someone to hold us. We need someone to feed us. We need the love and the nurturing. And God has designed this system where you and I get born helpless. It's a really humbling kind of system. But as we get older, we begin to grow from victim into something else, and hopefully it's a heroic role. We'll go there in a second. I remember a point in my life, I don't know why this memory has never left me, but I think it was that stage where you're moving from kind of self-identifying as a victim to self-identifying as somebody whom God has given agency to. I grew up in a single-parent home. My dad split when I was a kid, and my mom didn't have very much money, and we used to go to, it was a big treat in my house growing up in Houston, Texas, I know, awesome, to go to a place called Mr. Charburger. And it was as bad as it sounds, but we liked it. And I remember one day I'm playing around on a picnic table at Mr. Charburger, and we're getting to eat Mr. Charburger, and I fall off this picnic table. It was a concrete picnic table, and I just scrape up my knee. So, basic childhood kind of injury. I'm scraping my knee, and I'm crying, and I basically ruined the family moment at Mr. Charburger. Mom puts me in the back seat. My sister's in the front seat. We're driving, and I'll never forget this. My mother looked in the rearview mirror at me crying. I'm like 6 or 7 years old. She looks at me in the rearview mirror, and she says, Don, can you hold on for just 1 second? And so I stopped crying. I'm like, what? And she said, crying is not going to make the pain go away. And I just remember thinking, well, she's got a really good point there. Right? She's got a really good point. I think there's a temptation for some of us to get into this victim spiral. And if you think about being in the victim spiral, think about how much it offers you. It offers you a lot of attention, right? It offers you an excuse not to try. Because if I grew up a victim, then I have all sorts of excuses to not go to class today or not persevere because look at this hard thing that I have been handed. This is a deadly place to live inside of a story. And there are a couple reasons for that. In story structure, if you're writing a screenplay, there's something really fascinating that happens. The hero in the story changes. They experience a character transformation. At the beginning of the story, they're ill-equipped, they're full of doubt. At the end of the story, they're equipped, they're confident, they're making things happen. What's fascinating about the victim character in a story is they do not change. There is no transformation for a victim, which is so important to us, for us to remember that if we are truly victims, the calling is not to stay as a victim, but to move out of that identity into something else. We have to transform. God designed every living thing to get stronger until it dies, to change, to be different, to be a different person tomorrow than we are today. We must transform. We are designed to transform. And what this means is, as you leave your high school and you leave your home, and all those people back home thought of you as kind of a lazy person or a loser or whatever, guess what? You get to change. So that by the time you graduate from Liberty, you are not the person that you used to be. We are transformed, made new. Every living and healthy thing changes. And if you want to stunt your growth, self-identify as a victim. I love what Jesus calls us. He calls us conquerors. Jesus is not the one to sit us down and say, oh, you are a victim. He says, you are a conqueror. You are a champion. He names us. He speaks an identity into us that is in fact stronger than who we are at the moment so that we can become something different. And I'll tell you, a lot of you guys, probably one of the reasons I'm here is I'm like one of Liberty's token liberals to speak at chapel. But I got to tell you, as hopefully I see things in a balanced perspective, but one of the things that bothers me in a political cycle are politicians who tempt us to play the role of victim. I don't think we are victims. I don't think, there was 2 articles, one in the Washington Post, I think the other was in the New York Times just this past year, that says the next generation of Americans no longer believes in the American dream. For the first time in American history, we no longer believe that we can become better, in fact, than our parents. And I think, when I look at that, I think, oh no. The identity of an American is being tempted by victimhood, when in fact, we don't have to be victims. But who do we become? Well, we take the next step. We become heroes. And heroes are not this glamorous role that you're probably thinking right now. Because you're probably going, Don, I don't want to self-identify as a hero. That's very self-obsessed and narcissistic. But actually, when you look at what a hero is in a story, you'll be fascinated. Heroes are not these strong, capable characters. In fact, you would never write a hero like that. A hero at the beginning of the story is insecure, broken, ill-equipped, and filled with self-doubt. Raise your hand if that's you. Great, you've got what it takes to be a hero. It's always like that at the beginning. I mean, you step on campus and you just go, I don't think I have what it takes to do this. If you thought that when you stepped on campus, you have what it takes to be a hero, right? Because they never think they're going to get the thing done. And they're always broken. They're always hurting, filled with self-doubt. In fact, the hero and the villain, fascinatingly, have a similar backstory. If you see villains in movies, almost always, I'm going to let a little trick out of the bag here, almost always the villain has some sort of physical deformity. There's a scar on their face, there's a lisp, there's a limp, there's something going on with the hero that is physical. And the reason the screenwriters put that into the story is they wanted you to know this villain has a backstory in which they got hurt. I don't even need to explain to you what it is, but they got hurt. And the only difference, this is also true of the hero. There's a crippling effect to the hero. The only difference between the victim or the hero and the villain is how they responded to that pain. The villain got hurt, and their response to the pain was, I'm going to get the world back for what it did to me. And the hero responds and says, ow, that hurt. I'm going to stop anybody else from having to experience that. That's the difference between a villain and a hero. And that's why I think God calls us to be heroes. Not to escape pain or experience no comfort. That's not the idea here. There are incredible challenges to the hero. The hero wakes up every day and faces enormous amounts of challenge and pain and things they have to overcome. There's been this wrestling in the identity of the average evangelical that says, if we have Christ on earth, then life will be great and life will be easy. Problem is, I don't see that anywhere in the scriptures. I mean, really what that is it's a mechanism for selling products. If you buy Propecia, you won't go bald. Everything will be great. If you buy Jesus, everything will be great. There's nothing biblical about that. Can you imagine the Apostle Paul doing an infomercial for the product of Jesus? Like you're flipping through channels late at night and you come across, hey, I'm Paul. And I used to have a job and money and lots of power. If I didn't like you, I could kill you. I had great friends. Then I called this toll-free number, 1-800-JESUS, and I got Jesus. And now I don't have a job, don't have any friends, people don't like me. I'm routinely imprisoned and bitten by snakes. You too can have the product of Jesus if you just call 1-800. There's not much of a sales pitch there, right? So we know from this that what Jesus is calling to is not a life of comfort and ease, but a story that transforms us. And stories that transform us require pain. They are difficult. If you're writing a screenplay and you have a character that transforms without having to go through pain, you will lose the audience. Because joy changes nobody. Joy happens when the challenge has been gotten through. And it's the transitional space between one challenge and another. And please, don't mistake, it's awesome. But it's right back into the pit, right back into the challenge. And here's the thing that we have to remember. We don't get to be spectators to life. You are in the story. You are playing a role whether you want to or not. We are either the victim, the villain, the hero, or the guide. The hero wakes up every day and says, God needs me to save many lives and get off my butt and get to work. And yes, it's going to be hard. It was never promised to me to be easy. And I don't want it any other way because 1, I want to transform. And 2, I want to live a great story. And that requires challenge and hardship. And my attitude about that is bring it on. That is how we transform. That is how we live the beautiful story. You know, I have this friend named Josh Shipp, and I don't know if Josh has spoken here or not, but Josh, he's an amazing guy. He had a show on MTV for a while. Now he has a show, I think, with The Rock. He has a show on television with The Rock, which, you know, is cool. I was busy. And Josh is kind of a speaker to youth all over the world, and he helps them deal with some hard issues. And Josh and I got to know each other. And when we were getting to know each other, Josh told me his story. And Josh grew up in 26 foster homes. 26 different families Josh grew up in. And I said to him once, I said, Josh, I don't want to, ask too much here, but how did you become you growing up in 26 foster homes? Because he's one of the most healthy, well-adjusted people I know, truly on a heroic journey. And Josh said, it was about my 4th foster home. And the father in this house, something happened at school, and it was hard, and I was feeling sorry for myself. And he said to me, Josh, I want to tell you something, and I want you to listen really carefully, because if you understand it, your life is going to go okay. And he said, what is it? He said, when things like this happen, you have a choice. You can either become bitter or you can get better. That's it. And to me, this is the choice of whether we will be a victim or a hero. Remember, hero isn't this grandiose, narcissistic, beautiful thing. Heroes are troubled, just like victims are, but they're doing something about it. I think there's going to be a wrestling while you're here on campus for your identity. I think there's going to be enormous amounts of temptation for you to self-identify as a victim. And I would challenge you, don't take the bait. Identify as a hero. I remember when there was another sort of fork in the road in my life. Wrote some books, had some success, and really felt like God was saying to me, Don, I want you to write a book for young men who've grown up without father figures. And I thought, man, I could do that, I've made it. I can do that. I can help people stay out of the landmines. And so I went off to Orcas Island in the San Juans off the coast of Washington State. Beautiful place. In the winter, nobody is on Orcas Island. And I thought, I'm going to rent a cabin up here by myself and really process my life and try to write this book for people who had grown up without dads. So I go up there, and let me just tell you, if you're going to process your father wounds, don't go to an abandoned island in the winter. There are still sea otters who flee when they see me. There's like, we don't want to hear about your dad, and they splash themselves into the water. I've been a painful hard time because I got up there and I realized, wait, I haven't made it at all. I've got all sorts of issues that I've got to work through. I've got to go see a counselor about this stuff. And the more I study issues of fatherlessness, the more I realize I'm not a champion of this. I'm still in the midst of it. And the victim cycle started to spin in my brain. Oh, Don, what was you? No reason. No wonder you didn't make enough grades. No wonder you're struggling in your business. No wonder this because you grew up without a dad. And all those excuses started spiraling around. And I took a break, went back to Portland for a couple weeks, and I started reading a book just to get my mind off of the stuff that I was doing called Country of My Skull. And this book is about the formation of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa. So post-apartheid, Nelson Mandela put a committee together to try to heal the country. And he handed this committee to a man named Bishop Desmond Tutu. And Bishop Desmond Tutu was amazing. I mean, he's such a bright, cheerful, wonderful human being. His words are so charismatic and powerful, such an amazing believer. And he was asked at a press conference, which is recorded in this book, Bishop Tutu, what sort of person do you want to serve on the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa? What sort of person can heal this country? And Bishop Tutu said this. He said, I want victims. Victims will serve on the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Those who have been raped, those who have watched their parents killed, these are the people I want on the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. However, he said, and he added this, however, they cannot have stayed victims. They must have forgiven their oppressors. Can you imagine? And then he named these people. He said, these will be the wounded healers of our country. I want you to think about some of the hardest things that have ever happened to you. Think about them. And think about the temptation to let those hard things take you down and drown you in a sea of sorrow. And then I want you to imagine the hand of Jesus picking you up, holding you, and saying, to the evil one, this is what you did with my son. This is what you did with my daughter. Now watch what I do. I think about Christine Kane. Was just with Christine a couple weeks ago. Her first visit to Tennessee, she spoke at a dinner at the governor's mansion, which is just governor and I are next door neighbors in Tennessee. It's such a weird thing being in the South, because you call the governor, you want to come over for dinner? And he comes. It doesn't happen very often. But Christine Kane is there, and she's sharing her story of abuse in her background and what she's doing with it. It had given her the gift of empathy. Because of the abuse in her background, she was able to know, one, that people were abused, and two, that it hurt very badly, and three, that she was going to accept the heroic role of trying to do something about it. And God just plucked her up and said, this is what Satan did, but watch what I do. Watch how many hundreds of thousands of women will be rescued from this because of my touch on her life, transforming her from a victim to a hero. This is the identity that Christ wants us to have, to take our pain and wear it as a badge. So I read that book, went back, finished my own book, got some amazing opportunities, started an organization called the Mentoring Project, which trains men in churches to mentor fatherless boys. From there, I got to serve on a presidential task force, helped get some legislation passed that reunites men coming out of prison with their children to give them an identity other than that of criminal, hopefully saving taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars. And you would say to me, Don, I'm so sad you grew up without a dad. Was that hard? I don't remember. Like I feel like I won the lottery, for crying out loud. But if I wouldn't have grown up without a dad, I wouldn't have been able to work in the White House, wouldn't have been able to accomplish all this stuff, it just feels like a joyful thing to me. What a beautiful thing that God can actually take your wound and make something really gorgeous out of it. Something that gives you the authority to speak into a broken world. One thing that heroes do that victims cannot do, and villains certainly don't do, is they take responsibility for the life that's been given them. Right? I mean, I'm tempted with victimhood all the time, right? I mean, you just want to go, oh, it's not my fault. I have a company back home. We have about 10 employees, and we have core values in our for-profit company. What we do is we help billion-dollar brands sell you more stuff. That's what we do. Thank you. I mean, you're welcome. That's what we do. But our core values are spelled out really clearly for our company. And one of the core values for our company is we do not self-identify as victims. We don't do it. And the surest way to get yourself out of our company is to make excuses or self-identify as a victim. Why? Because it kills whatever culture that you're in. It will crush it. We just don't self-identify as victims. I want to look also at the villain. There's this choice when something really hard happens to us and when we're processing the pain of our past. Are we going to become the hero or are we going to become the villain? And the villain, of course, gets bitter. The villain also does not change. They're the same at the beginning as they are at the end. They're sort of shallow characters. Villains are incapable of learning, for instance, from their mistakes. They justify their mistakes. A villain always has to be right. Villain can't process, oh, I made a mistake. They always have to spin it in such a way that they're right. Some of you are thinking right now, my roommate is a villain. Could be. Could be. There's actually not that many of them. Villains, by the way, have no friends and no equals, only minions. Only minions. Cute little minions. Villains can't be vulnerable. They can't be vulnerable. They can't share their weaknesses with other people. They always need to be perceived as strong. And remember, there's some sympathy here because villains have been hurt and they've made a vow with the world, I will never be hurt again. The hero's vow is, I'm going to stop other people from being hurt. The villain's vow is, I'll never be hurt again. It's still a narcissistic view of life. But finally, I want to close with what I think is the role that we all want to head toward. And we have to play the role of hero well in order to earn the role of guide. And a guide is somebody who has already played the heroic role in their life, and they're transitioning, so now they're going to start giving their life away. Every hero is looking for a guide. Luke Skywalker, he's given this incredible, difficult challenge of destroying the Death Star. He's wondering if he has what it takes to be a Jedi. He doesn't know if he can do it, and so storytellers for centuries have been putting another role into the story, the role of guide. So when Luke Skywalker doesn't know if he can do it, who steps into his life? Now, Yoda or Obi-Wan Kenobi, right? When Katniss in Hunger Games, anybody read Hunger Games? Very bad Southern Baptist. Feel guilty, feel guilty. When Katniss doesn't know if she can do it, who steps into her life? Yeah, Woody from Cheers. The guide character steps in, and the guide is this fascinating character. They're the ones who more or less lay down their lives so that the hero can win the day and actually transform. In fact, in Inside Out, do you remember the clown Boingo? Bingo? Bing bong. I'm a story expert. Yeah. Bing bong, what does he do? He lays down his life so that the heroes can keep moving, right? I'm sorry, I might have gotten a name wrong. He lays down his life so the heroes can keep moving and be on their way. I think this is where we're heading in our stories. We want to become the guide. I had this chance to interview Pete Carroll, coach of the Seattle Seahawks. Oh, go Hawks. And several years ago, and I sat down with Coach Carroll. It was the most fascinating interview. He gave me 15 minutes. He gave me a 15-minute interview. And I went up to Seattle, went to his corner office up there, and I thought, okay, I'm going to talk to him about 15 minutes. And really what I wanted to talk to him about was not football. Coach has a backstory, and while he was at USC, Coach Carroll was driving to work one day, and he heard on the radio that some kids had been killed in the inner city in gang violence. And of course, his heart kind of went out to them, went to work, worked the day. The next day, he's driving to work, more kids had been killed. By the end of the week, 11 kids had been killed in gang violence in inner city Los Angeles. And Pete is one of these guys who doesn't have that filter that says, you can't do this, you're not allowed to do this. So he thinks, I'm going to do something about gang violence in inner city Los Angeles while I'm winning 36 consecutive games as USC's head coach. He's just like you and me. And so, without telling his wife, he gets up in the middle of the night, gets into his car, and he drives into the most dangerous neighborhood in Los Angeles. And he gets out of the car, and he just starts walking around until he can find some kids. And they see him, and they say, aren't you Pete Carroll? And he says, yeah. He says, listen, I've heard there's a problem. There's apparently one group called the Crips and another group called the Bloods. And you guys don't like each other. Can you explain some of that to me? And they said, aren't you Pete Carroll? Anyway, he ends up making friends with these guys, right? He ends up making friends with these guys, and they become really close. He goes over and has dinner at their houses all the time. He invites them to practice, and he starts an organization secretly called A Better Los Angeles to help curb gang violence in Los Angeles. And just 3 years ago, the Los Angeles Times released an article saying gang violence was rapidly on decline in Los Angeles, and they listed several reasons. One of the reasons was Pete Carroll. And so I wanted to know why. Why in the world do you care so much? And I said, Pete, can you explain to me why your heart just got broken for these kids? And he said, Don, here's the story. And he said, you cannot, this was before they won the Super Bowl. He said, you can't print this because people get mad at me when I don't focus on football. And I said, okay, well, what's the story? He said, early on, I won a lot. I mean, I just won a lot. And he said, Don, it was so empty. I would win, and it was just like, this is empty. And he said, but then I discovered something. I discovered when I help other people win, I feel fulfilled. And so it changed my whole mentality about coaching. I just wanted my players to win. I wanted my assistant coaches to win. He had a report on how the janitor at the USC stadium could win. Everybody around him, I just want to help you win. And this was the difference between the coach. Now I can tell you that story because he won a Super Bowl, right? He laid down his life. That's what the guy does. The guy lays down their life for other heroes so that they can win. I'll close with a story about my youth pastor in Texas at this little Southern Baptist church. His name was David Gentiles, and David Gentiles was an amazing guy. He believed in me when nobody else believed in me. There was no reason for anybody to believe in me. Gave me my first shot at writing, and David and I would keep in touch. In fact, Blue Like Jazz is dedicated to David Gentiles. We kept in touch for years and remained friends, and every once in a while, Dave and I would talk, and I'd say, Dave, you know, you're an amazing songwriter. You're an amazing writer. Are you working on your book? Because I really want the world to kind of know who you are. I mean, you're a brilliant, brilliant guy. And Dave would say, yeah, Don, I was kind of thinking about this book. And we'd get started, and I'd kind of help him with it. And then it would just die off, and he wouldn't do anything with it. This happened for decades, 20 years. And David went from the youth pastor at a church to kind of an associate pastor somewhere else. And every church that he went to got smaller and more dysfunctional as the years went on. Till finally, he was in a church in Austin, Texas that was really small, met in this little warehouse, and it was basically an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting gone really, really bad. And I got a call one night from the pastor of that church. David was an associate pastor. They said, Don, I have really bad news for you. I said, what is it? He said, David was at a gym last night at about midnight, and he was alone, and he was trying to reach his maximum bench press. And I thought, this isn't going to be a good story. And the bar fell on him. He's in the ICU. He's not going to make it. And you need to get on an airplane. And I got on the next airplane. David passed not much long later. And his 3 daughters, we got them home from Europe and from all over where they were. It was a rough, rough night. And they asked me to deliver the eulogy at this little bitty church of maybe 30 people. And So I started working on it in the hotel room. And as I worked on it, I found myself with so many mixed emotions because he was so much like a father to me. I found myself frustrated that he never let the world know who he was, that he didn't have the impact that I wanted him to have, that I got really successful and nobody ever knew about David, and he's the one who had all the talent and the heart. It seemed unfair to me. And as I prepared that, I'm just bawling and crying and pacing around in this hotel room trying to prepare this eulogy. Pastor called, said, Don, hey, the church, it's a small church. A lot of friends and family are coming in. We moved it to this other church, 20 minutes across town, and we'll be doing it there. So just show up at that church for the eulogy. I said, great, perfect. Kept processing it. Why didn't the world know about David? Why didn't he go out there and play that heroic role and bang the gong for himself? Got another call from the pastor. Hey, Don, we're going to have to move this to another church. We're just getting a lot of calls. Okay, sounds good. This big church, one of the bigger churches in town. Okay, that's interesting. Keep working on my eulogy, writing all this stuff. Get another call. Don, last minute switch. We had to move this thing to a baseball stadium. And I don't want you to get nervous, but there are going to be several news trucks there covering this funeral. This guy never wrote a book, never wrote a song. I get there and I walk into this baseball stadium, and all the grandstands are full, and then the hill above the grandstands are full. There's multiple news trucks, and this guy had literally changed his entire community one person at a time, laying down his life for them, saying, it's not about me winning, how can I help you win? And I can't tell you how many books had been written by the people in that crowd, how many songs had been written by the people in that crowd. While I was writing about myself, David was writing me. He was building into my story, and this person's story, and this person's story, and this person's story. We were his life's work. And then I look back at the life of Christ, who never wrote a book, wrote some words in the sand, and they won't tell us what they were. I'm pretty sure it was Go Hawks. And you are his story. You are his story. This whole time he's been building you, and the challenges that you face, he has put in your way because he knows that you can overcome them. And when you and I are tempted to play the victim, he says to us, you are not a victim, you are a conqueror. You are a hero, and you are becoming the guide. We are born victims. We have a choice to become either villains or heroes. And once we are through winning our heroic journey and realizing it's mostly empty, we learn to lay down our lives like Christ and give our lives to others. Can I pray a prayer of blessing over you as so many of you begin your journey here at Liberty, some of you ending that journey, that we would become the heroic characters God intended us to be on our path to laying down our lives and becoming like Christ. Jesus, we're so grateful that you've given us a place and a community and a group of people who remind us over and over, we don't have to be victims, we can be conquerors. Will you help us as we fight so hard for our identity? Who will we be? What role will we play? In Jesus' name, amen.